Hello again. Welcome to Spielberg Project Part 2. This week we're going to be looking at another episode of the Night Gallery. This one is called Make Me Laugh. It's the 6th episode, I believe, directed by Steven Spielberg, of course. The plot of this one is fairly straightforward, and again, it's a typical Night Gallery Twilight Zone-y ending. When you have the inventor of a plot twist, some of the things start to become a little bit predictable. The episode follows a comic named Jackie Slater, who is very bad at his job. He gets fired, and his agent leaves him, and he's drinking himself to death inside of a bar when he runs into a guru, or guru, as the guy who's playing the guru calls it. I think he was trying to be Indian. It looks like his skin's been painted a little bit. I don't know why they didn't just hire an Indian actor. I don't know if they were in short supply in 1969 or what, but anyway. The guru tells Jackie that in order to keep his guru status, he is required to perform one miracle a month. And he has not been able to find anyone that is willing to let him perform a miracle. Jackie asks him if he can make it so that he makes people laugh, and the guy says yes. He warns him, however, that he is a klutz of a guru. Inside of fairy tales, you have the genie that gives you exactly what you ask for, but not in the way that you wanted it. He does that by accident. He doesn't mean to. For example,
there was a wrestler in Vero Beach, Florida, who wanted to visit Tibet. That was his dream. He awoke to find himself stranded atop Mount Everest in the midst of an unmerciful blizzard. They finally had to fetch him down with a pair of ice tongs.
And a second example.
Having to do with a retired school teacher in Spokane, Washington, a Civil War buff, passionate admirer of the great emancipator, wanted only one thing, to be in Lincoln's shoes. Wound up in an insane asylum, claiming he was a woolen sock, had to be restrained from sticking darning needles into his head.
But Jackie doesn't care because he's desperate, so he asks him to make it so that he makes people laugh. The unintended consequence, however, is that everything he says makes people laugh, so he becomes the top comic in the country. People all over come to hear him perform because he just makes them laugh at the drop of a hat. So that's that joke.
I took off my hat. They screamed all over the place.
Huh. Anyway, he becomes incredibly bored because, it's very difficult to be a comic and you have to work at it. It's really hard. You have to spend hours poring over the right phrasing, the right delivery, the right facial expression. And now all that's been taken away from him. He just has to open his mouth and people guffaw. 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 Fun word. Guffaw. He's finally offered a dramatic role because that happens to comics a lot. He goes and auditions for this dramatic Broadway role, and every time he opens his mouth, people laugh. He leaves the audition, and the guru is waiting for him outside to say he's sorry. Jackie says that he wants it to make it so that he doesn't make people laugh anymore. He wants to be able to touch people emotionally and make them cry. The guru tells him that there's a rule. He can only do one miracle per person. Jackie says, well, I don't care. I want you to do it or I'm going to beat the crap out of you. So the guru does it. And he tells him that he will no longer make people laugh. And so he decides to try it. He signals the nearest person he can find and tries to tell them a joke to see if it'll make her laugh. And he gets hit by a car and dies. So, let's talk about Spielberg now. Again, this is still made when he was only 21. It's one of his earliest paid directing positions. I think he learned a couple of lessons from the previous one because he doesn't try to be all avant-garde. He makes some very interesting decisions. Does this one shot that is either poorly done or very clever.
Chatterjee is the name. Miracles by profession.
Miracles.
Miracles.
That's just what I need, Mr. Chatterjee. You are now face to face with Mr. Unlucky.
Forgiveness, Mr. Slater. But compared to me, you are the winner of the Irish sweepstakes. You are the owner of the 1969 New York Mets. And on the day they repealed Prohibition, you are the little old winemaker.
Your indulgence, Mr. Chatterjee, but I am a shipmaker in the desert.
As you can see, the movement of the camera, it makes you feel like you're kind of sitting inside the corner of a bar, and then these two guys are talking, and you're kind of drawn into their conversation slowly until you're right there. However, I'm not sure if this is a really good decision or a flawed decision, because the dialogue in that particular moment does not pull you in. It's not gripping. If you were to walk by and hear two people saying that stuff, you wouldn't really feel the need to stop and listen or try and get closer to them. So that's why it might be a poor decision, because the shot does not fit the moment. Had you done it later in the scene where what they're talking about does start to pull you in, that might have worked. However, because it's dialogue that is not particularly gripping, he may have intended for the shot to be what pulls you in instead of the dialogue. Because the dialogue wouldn't pull you in, he uses the camera to pull you in instead. So that's why it might be particularly clever. So that might have been what he intended, and if so, that was a very, very good and mature decision to look at the scene and say, this isn't going to do what we need it to. How can I fix that? He makes this one really cool shot to make you aware of the space. See? Following. Sits down. Brief conversation between him and the mirror. And then we cut to this shot, and he's no longer sitting in the chair. I find that to be odd. Seems like it'd be pretty easy to fix. Or to notice, for that matter. Must have taken a little bit to set up that second shot. He also does this one shot at the end after he's been hit by the car. It's unnecessary. Everything in that shot we get out of the next one.
I wonder if I'll ever get the hang of it.
It may have just been put in there as filler. Steven Spielberg may have taken that shot just in case you can use it. A good rule for your directors: always shoot more than you need, especially in the digital age. Back then you had to worry about using too much film and that costing money, but now hard drive space is pretty cheap. Set up your camera as many places as you possibly can when doing a scene over and over and over again. He may have decided to scrap it, and then they said the episode's not long enough, we need a couple more seconds. Alright then, put in that shot of the old lady. Possible explanation, you never know. One thing that I did notice inside of these first few episodes, Spielberg did not have a good handle yet on suspense. This is the Night Gallery. They're supernatural, sci-fi kind of ghost stories. It may have been that these don't really lend themselves to being tense or suspenseful, but it feels like they should have a kind of air of moving towards something, that audience guessing and trying to figure out what's going to happen, and Spielberg does not pace it correctly to where you're tense and kind of on the edge of your seat the whole time, the way that he will be 6 years later with Jaws, where you're just the whole movie. I don't know if it was just he felt like these episodes didn't need that, or if he just hadn't quite learned how yet. Both are possible. Well, that was this week's brief episode of the Spielberg Project. Next week, I'm going to be looking at the pilot episode of the detective show Columbo. Goodbye, Internet. Watch more Storyline. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow people on Twitter, etc., etc., etc.